the last house that had sold had closed for like 850 or 900, and everybody was like, "Oh my god, this is craziness." And then someone listed their house at 1 million. And even this guy was like, I was watching this thing as it was happening. No way he was going to get 1 million. It closed 2 weeks later for 1.35.
Yeah.
Ugh. The next house to hit on that was April of 2022.
Okay.
In the 2 weeks later, the next house to hit the market went on the market at like mid 800s, sat on the market for 4 months, ended up closing at like 775. So they went from 750 to 850 to 1.3 instantly down. Like they almost dropped 40-50% in value in 2 weeks on paper. Hey everyone, today I am very excited to be joined by Chris Lawhead. And if you don't know Chris, you've got to know him. You know, Chris is a mortgage broker extraordinaire, dare I say. And he's got several specialties, including investment properties, but he also takes care of all my traditional clients as well for all their lending needs, fix and flip funding. Like he spans the gamut, and his market knowledge is quite literally next to none. He's also one of the most trustworthy and honest guys in this business, and I don't say that lightly because that goes a long way with relationships in this business. So, Chris, welcome. How you doing?
Thank you, Alex. I'm doing great. I appreciate the kind words.
Good, good, good. Glad to have you here. So, before we jump into everything, just want to give you a quick recap of what we're going to go over. We're going to explore kind of the year of 2023 and what happened in our real estate market, specifically in Denver, right? We are a little bit of an isolated bubble, I would say, maybe in comparison to the rest of the country for a number of reasons. And we're going to cover appreciation, depreciation, all the things that you really want to know, and then what our predictions could be for the following year, right, of 2024 and even beyond. So that way, you know, if you are looking to move here to Denver, if you're looking at a house, you're looking to move within Denver, relocate, or just want to know, you know, what's going on with the biggest investment you've made, we're going to cover it all. But before we jump into that, Chris, I want to hear from you. And how'd you get into the lending business? Talk to me about your story a little bit. And yeah, fill me in on who Chris is.
Yeah, I mean the longer version of the story is I was a musician 20 some odd years ago. Hit some financial bumps in the road when my wife got sick and needed to make real money. And went back to school to study engineering. Thought I was going to be a geophysicist. Turns out I'm not built to have a desk job. I started lending with my buddy Brian, who has built the largest and oldest wholesale mortgage brokerage in Colorado. It's called Excel Financial Group. I started lending money with him, and then I started syndicating real estate deals, so multifamily deals, and then I branched into farmland. Fast forward now to current, I've got my little humble private lending business where I lend my personal money and I lend other people's money. And then I have my brokerage where I have, 60, 70 lenders in a pipeline, and I lend their money as well. So I lend anything from $50,000 of my own money to, $1 million to somebody else's. And it's all secured by real estate. That's the only thing I'm a real expert at is real estate, multifamily, single family, residential, and ag land. And I'm just here to help, right? Just here to help. And everybody, the beauty of real estate, as you know, is it's a leveraged investment, right? You want $100,000 in stocks, you need 100 grand generally. You want $100,000 in real estate, well, you can get that done with 5 grand, 10 grand, 20 grand, sometimes zero, right? Although I encourage people to put some scratch in the game. But yeah, here I am. We've done some deals together, and it's a privilege to be here.
Awesome. Great. So how long have you been in the lending business? Now, actually, as I say that, I realize, I'm calling you a lender, but you in the past have corrected me on that. But I know your evolution has kind of changed in your offerings. When I first met you, I think you were strictly a broker, but
Correct.
nobody knows the difference, right? I get this question asked once a week at least. So, lender versus broker, what the heck's the difference? Why is one better or different than the other?
Well, let's just say banker versus broker, right? So a
Okay.
banker has one line of money, their bank's money. So they might have three products. They might have a conventional loan, construction, whatever it is, and they might have 10 products. A broker has 50, 60 lenders in a pipeline, and they have different requirements, different overlays, different offerings, right? And so if one of the lenders in a broker's portfolio of lenders isn't a good fit, well, maybe the next one is, or the next one is. Or if you're going down the road and one of those lenders is not performing, you can switch. I mean, going down the road, meaning you've got a deal under contract, that lender's giving you a hard time over something stupid. You can pivot, choose another lender, and get across the finish line that way. There are advantages to competition. Competition generally drives down prices. So I am obviously biased because I'm a broker,
Mm-hmm.
but I became biased because I started investing in real estate before I became a lender. Like I said, I bought a house hack, and then I started buying some multifamily, and I just compared the rates, right? And for at least for Fannie and Freddie and Govy loans, government loans, FHA, VA, USDA, I was finding better terms, better pricing with Brian Emmett, who founded Excel Financial, who happens to be a good friend of mine. But I found better mathematics for my goals. And now that doesn't mean the brokers are great at everything, right? They're not the best at jumbo loans, for example, or maybe some construction stuff. But that's how I got into being a mortgage broker. Now, being a mortgage broker has its limits as well.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you need to be flexible. Sometimes you need to be really flexible if the deal makes sense, and maybe Fannie and Freddie won't buy it on the secondary market, or maybe one of the lenders in my pipeline won't touch it. And that's why I opened Acres First Lending. And Acres First is my private lending practice. So I look at this all as my lending practice, but you need some private money too. And that private money is my money, mine. And then it's my investors' money, right? Guys, you're going to look in the eye and shake their hands. And we lend privately to fix and flippers, to bridges, to farmers. And so I look at it holistically as a practice, as opposed to, and I'm not knocking bankers. I have a lot of banker friends, and I rely on these bankers for giving me lines of credit and whatnot. But a broker simply has more options, and then you pair a broker with some private stuff, and you've just got a lot of options to be of service to the community.
Great. Good deal. And
That's a
with that, I
long-winded
mean,
answer, isn't it?
yeah, no, it's a great answer. Because frankly, we just don't know. I didn't know for years, right,
Mhm.
what the difference was. And I'm a real estate agent, right? And so the first stop for anybody buying is getting pre-approved for something. And everybody gets the emails from Chase and Wells Fargo, and you're like, oh God, do I really have to work with one of those banks that takes an average of 45 days to close, right? And so it's just trying to educate people and put them in touch with the person that's going to treat them the best ultimately. So no, that is a great answer. No long-winded anything. So, and you have a different, view on the market than I do. You see it from a different angle. You see it from debt coverage. You see it, from LTV points of view. I see it mostly from numbers and buyer activity and craziness. And so going over what happened in 2023 versus looking at all these headlines, right, that are there to get clicks,
Mhm.
and everybody, calling for the end of the world for 4 years straight, and they've all been wrong. To look at the numbers, one of my mentors, old mentors, Charles Roberts, he was always very numbers driven. What do the numbers say? Right. And so that's the only thing that drives my decisions and how I can coach my clients, whether they're looking to buy or sell. But from your point of view, you can look at the money and how much things are costing people at a different level. So I'm kind of fascinated to go over these numbers for what happened in the entire year of 2023. And some of these actually surprised me quite a bit more because I see these numbers daily, but until you break it down point for point, dot for dot, it's hard to see that, for example, right? Closed price in Denver over the last 12 months. And funny enough, over the last 18 months, we've had more than a 25% swing in value in prices of the median price. We dropped from April 2022 to January of 2023. We were down by 15%. Okay. in
Wow.
value. We topped out as like 615, something like that. Um, and we went all the way down to like 520, right, in median value. And then we went up by 12%. And so you see these crazy wild swings, but year after year, you've just got 1 point on a plot. And so you only see like, oh, we were up by half of a percent. You don't feel the
Right.
wildness that happens in between. Um, so going over some of these numbers, and I'd love your input as to what you think, why you think, just any insight on these numbers, because this is what everybody in the country is looking at right now on their biggest investment, right? Which is their
Mhm.
house. And yes, I'm going to call it an investment because I've seen owning a house change people's lives. Period.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely. The recommendation, I've heard people like Grant Cardone say, "Hey, don't buy a house.
yeah,
Don't buy a house.
yep.
Rent, rent, rent."
Gary Vaynerchuk, same thing, right?
Yeah. I just simply, hey, ton of respect. Those guys are far more successful than I am, but I disagree because I've seen it firsthand over it. I mean, for over a decade, I've seen
Yep.
over 2 decades.
Yeah.
I've seen people greatly benefit from at least owning the house they live in.
Yeah. 100%.
Anyway, go ahead.
100%. So
Yeah.
closed price. And so for some of these stats, when they were really wild, I pulled up the year before because the last year and a half, we've kind of been in a very similar market as you're going to see here. So starting off with the closed price, December of 2022, so a year and a month ago today, right?
Okay.
Our median close price for all of the Denver Metro MLS. So part of that includes some stuff south all the way to the Springs, up to a little bit of Fort Collins, just the whole footprint of the Denver MLS was $532,500. Okay. That's the median.
Okay.
December of 2023, 1 year later, $535,000. So $2,500 difference year over year. So flat, absolutely flat.
Flat. Yep.
And I went back, I was like, all right, what did it do the year before? Because we've been seeing, 10% appreciation over the last few years, right? Well, in December of 2021, it was 521,000. So really in the last 2 years, 24 months, we are up essentially $11,000 in value. That's 1% over the last 2 years. Now, if you look back a year prior, it was like mid 400s. So yeah, we skyrocketed in 2020, but I was surprised to see that. What's your take? I mean, when we talk about the average price appreciation being what, 6% in the Denver metro market, what do you say to someone who looks at this and goes, shit, your market's been flat for 2 years. You're about to crash.
Well, I, I I acknowledge the flatness. I would not confirm the crash. You and I both, at least that I'm not a crash predictor, and I don't think there's a crash coming. But
Yep.
if you just think of the laws of averages, right? I was born in the '70s. Since the '70s, we've had an appreciation, depending on your source, of between 5 and 6%, right? So that's a pretty darn accurate number, confirmed by multiple sources, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if you've had multiple years of double digits, of course you're going to see a flattening. Of course you're going to see a slowdown. It can't go up 10% every year indefinitely. And that people are getting the mass formation, I call it, or the sickness, the insanity when you hear these and I've heard these agents talk about it's never going to stop. It's a runaway train.
Yeah.
No,
No.
no. I mean, history.
Yeah.
What's the saying? I mean, history doesn't always repeat itself, but it certainly rhymes.
Yeah.
Um, so, of course, if we've had an average of 5 to 6% over my entire life, and I'm in my 40s, I'm going to bet that we're going to have an average of 6% moving forward. So when we see a few double-digit years, we're going to have a leveling off.
Yeah.
Now, why did that happen? Well, we had interest rates, right? But why hasn't it? Why hasn't it dipped? A lot of people ask it.
Exactly.
Why hasn't it dipped? Um, well, inventory. Why isn't there more inventory? They're not building fast enough, and people are not exiting their house. People get addicted to that lower interest rate. They might have locked
Sure.
in 2.5, 3% when we're at the in the insanity of COVID, and we hit those really, really low rates, and everybody refied, and now they're stuck. Right now, they're not stuck necessarily mathematically, although
Mm-hmm.
that's a part of it, right? Do they want to? Do these older folks want to exit their 5-bedroom house now that their kids are out of the house, and go get a townhome, and now the townhome is at 6.5%, 7%, and they're locked in at 2.5%. It's a big psychological thing to get over, and of course there's some math in it, but I see more of it in the psychology, right?
Yeah.
Um, do you see that too? Just the psychology of buyers and sellers?
100%. That's more than anything, and it's easier now to benchmark off of what our parents uh, kind of like experienced in their lifetime for home values, right? Where they bought at
Hmm.
50,000 and now it's worth 800,000, and they're librarians, and they live on the beach of California and they they
Right.
could afford it. And we're seeing that opportunity slip away from us a little bit. But I look at these close prices, right? And no, I'm not seeing a decline right now, right? But I'm seeing flat for 2 years. So 2 years ago, I don't know if people were making more or less money in general, but I would say it looks to me like there's an opportunity here with figures can't lie, but liars can figure, right? And neighborhoods are not created equally. And I think you can dive into the nuances of each neighborhood, and I think you can see some very drastic differences. So on the surface, we see flat in certain neighborhoods. I think we're still seeing down 10 to 15% in some neighborhoods, and I
Yep.
think we're seeing up 10 to 15% in other neighborhoods. And I think the neighborhoods where we're seeing the downticks is where there's opportunity, right? I mean, heck, I was just looking at one the other day, house on a golf course in 2021, January 2021. Was it 2021? 2022. Right before the mania of like, oh my God, everything's getting 10 to 20% over asking price.
Hmm.
Um, which statistically it was like 4.5% over on all houses. But we all hear the stories, right? And I saw one because
Hmm.
I felt really bad for this guy, home seller, wanting to get out of his house. Everything in the neighborhood was selling for 750, right? 750, 750. And then we started boom, 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 up and away. Um, they had one, the last house that had sold, had closed for like 850 or 900, and everybody was like, "Oh my god, this is craziness." And then someone listed their house at 1 million, and even this guy was like, "I was watching this thing as it was happening. No way he was going to get 1 million." It closed 2 weeks later for 1.35.
Yeah.
Ugh. The next house to hit on that was April of 2022.
Okay.
In the 2 weeks later, the next house to hit the market went on the market at like mid 800s, sat on the market for 4 months, ended up closing at like 775. So they went from 750 to 850 to 1.3 instantly down. Like they almost dropped 40-50% in value in 2 weeks on paper, right? But all you see is from the beginning of the year to the end of the year on the dots.
Hmm.
And so you don't see that massive spike. And I think that happened in a lot of neighborhoods. Park Hill neighborhood in Denver, we saw a lot of that 100, 200 grand over, and then the party was over. Boom.
Yep.
And so how do you really look at what the values could be, and what happened? And I think we're getting over that knee jerk reaction a little bit. I think things are
Hmm.
settling, and we're up from last year, year over year, just a tiny bit. And as long as we continue our spring trajectory, like we might be up by a couple percent this year, right? It
Yeah.
might just slow. But I was pretty interested to see. I didn't know we've been basically flat for 2 years straight, right? I would
Yeah.
not have guessed that.
Yeah. I think, the saying that real estate is local and it's really local
Yeah.
is true, right? And I still see, even though things have slowed down and, dare I say, normalized,
Mm-hmm.
right, relative to the insanity that happened, you know, with the shutdowns, and then everybody was moved, everybody who wanted to move tried to move, and all that. But now it's more normal. Now I am
Yep.
seeing in these nicer neighborhoods, the more desirable neighborhoods, I'm still seeing 5, 6, 7 offers
Yep.
on one place.
Yep.
Um, and in other neighborhoods, so I have a client right now buying, and she beat them up with inspection items, beat up the seller. And I mean, beat up the seller. I hadn't seen a contract like this in 5 years. And the seller's like, agreed, agreed, agreed. We'll do it all.
Yep. 100%.
And and I even told Brian, I'm like, hey, the The seller's market is over,
Yep.
because I hadn't seen anything like that in many years. So it depends on the neighborhood.
Yep.
It depends on the deal. And that sounds about normal to me. Doesn't
Yeah.
that feel a little more
Yeah.
normal? I mean, the last few years we had institutional buyers rushing in, the
Mm-hmm.
Vanguards and the BlackRocks. I mean, it's at one point I saw a stat, some of those guys were buying 30 to 50,000 houses a month, right? They were going hard in the paint. Now that's not just in Denver, but that's
Yeah.
across the board, right?
Yeah.
But they were going hard in the paint. And when we were battling out, us and our clients were battling out trying to get new home buyers their first 3-bed, 2-bath,
Mm-hmm.
and they were being beat out by all these cash buyers. I'm like, where are they coming
Yeah.
from? It's not that many Californians moving here.
No.
There's not that many Texans moving here. And part of that was institutional capital. Well, obviously institutional capital has stopped
Mm-hmm.
their acquisition frenzy.
Yep.
And that's helped normalize everything. And yeah, it feels like it felt 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago, doesn't
Yeah.
it?
Yeah. 100%. And, with that, I think those institutional buyers were what, 20-25% of the market for 2 years straight. So you get them out of the market, and all of a sudden, and we'll talk about it, our closings may reflect just the elimination of the institutional buyers, right? Yeah, 100%. So on to the next one. So new listings. This one isn't as fun, but it's an interesting thing to really think about conceptually. In the entire Denver market in December, there were 2,800 new homes to hit the market in 2022, right? In 2023, there were 2,800 homes to hit the market. 2,800 people out of what, a metro area of 3 to 4 million
Yeah,
are,
that's a really low number.
it's a really, like, we're back to what, 2015, 2014 levels um, on new listings to hit the market. And there's more people here than there were then. So it's just adding and helping, it's purely supply and demand 101 stuff here, right? Which is just amazing to see at work. This is the best supply and demand lesson I have ever gone through in my entire life, right? And we're all seeing it and feeling it. And no matter how much buyers want to think like, hey, my cash offer at 20% under asking has got to be attractive, the hell it is. It
Right.
is not. It just isn't, because there's nobody. There's 2,800 people that wanted to sell their house and made that decision to put it on the market in December. Just fascinating. So year over year, we're flat, right? Active listings. This is the big jump, which still supply and demand. This is just telling me what normalizing is like in Denver. So in 2022, December 2022, we had 12,300 homes on the market, okay, in all of the Denver metro area.
Okay.
December of 2023, we had 10,060, so 20% less, okay, than we did a year before. December 2021, this was the fun one, 5,200. So we went from 5,200 in 2021 to 10,000, double the amount of active inventory that you can look at on the market, which is amazing that December was that low of 2021. I mean, the buyers I'm working with now, there's nothing on the market. I don't remember. I must have amnesia or something, because I can't believe that there were that few houses on the market. And then this year, we have 20% more than last year. So we went up by 50%. Then we've gone up by another 20%. Yet prices remain stable.
It's wild,
Totally
isn't it?
fascinating.
Yeah, I think if you zoom out, take the 10,000-foot view,
Yeah.
none of those numbers is enough,
No.
right? No, there's just not enough, right? And when you're rattling all those numbers off, I was just thinking, this is going to show my age here, but I was just thinking, we haven't gone through a phase where the builders have gone crazy, right? Like
Yeah.
the builders, dare I say, are disciplined.
Yeah.
Back in the day, the builders would overbuild, right? They build, 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 build. They just, that feeding frenzy, then there'd be too much inventory, and that would push down pricing,
Yep.
right? That hasn't happened.
No.
Why hasn't that happened? Now, I don't know this, right? I don't know why, but I'm going to speculate here.
Yep.
It's harder to build. The fixed costs are bigger, right? The fixed cost of hooking up to the utilities, the water taps and stuff like that. Municipalities are harder to work with. I know that for sure, because I, well, I've pulled some permits in my day.
Hmm.
You've pulled some permits in your day, and then we have building clients and friends. And I mean, it might take, if you want to go build a duplex in Sloan's Lake, for example, that might be a 2 or 3 year project.
Yeah.
I've got buddies trying to build a townhome development in Lakewood, and they're 3.5 years into it, and they haven't broken ground. So
Wow.
there's probably a lot of reasons in addition to those why builders haven't gone bonkers. But if you think back to the 80s, 90s, I mean, when there was an opportunity, and obviously my cat has some opinions about this.
You got a
What
friend.
the Yeah. Back in the day when there was an opportunity to build, they build, and you know, uh, that huge surge of inventory
Yeah.
would affect prices. That isn't happening.
Nope.
Um, that's my best answer to that is inventory, inventory, inventory,
Yep.
right?
100% is fully controlling the market, which I mean, closed listings compared to the amount of active, like, so this is what was funny too, is that December of 2022, we closed 4,300 homes. Okay. December of 2023, we closed 4,200. So flat year over year. December of 2021, we closed over 7,000. So we're up six. The closings were down by what? 50%, not quite 50%, 40% from 2021 to 2022, went flat 2022 to 2023. Um, that's a big that's a big deal, and that affects the industry in a part. I don't know how big the real estate industry is in comparison to other industries like oil and gas and big pharma, but I can tell you if we got 30% less closings, that's 30% less revenue for any photography company, any staging
Yeah.
company, any transaction coordination company, title companies, lenders, or real estate agents. Like, there are a lot of people involved in the process of buying and selling a home, and having that few closings in comparison affects the entire industry. And I'm starting to see it in contractors, right? For the first time since 2011, 2012, I'm having contractors bid against each other, right? Sewer line was a perfect example. We expected about $12,000 bids. We got bids in at 8,500, and then they started fighting against each other. We didn't intentionally do it. We just brought it up to an old, somebody we did a bunch of sewer lines with, said, "Hey, we got another quote. It was a little bit cheaper." And he's like, "Great, I'll beat it. What is it?" Just to keep his crews going. So without that
It's
many
been a
sales,
while. Yeah.
people aren't painting their house as much. They're not updating their roof as much. They're not redoing their sewer line as much. Like, how many how much are contractors actually busy based on everybody buying and selling, right? And I think the number is bigger than I think.
Well, these are great points. And listen, I know I've got plenty of examples like that. It's amazing to hear now that finally contractors are bidding against each other.
Mm-hmm.
Finally, as someone who's, flipped houses and gotten work done on his own house and just been in the game, there was many, many years, dare I say at least the last 5 to 7 years for me, where um, if you got a decent contractor, you held on to them like they were a bar of gold.
Yeah.
They were just so precious, and you would do deals just to keep them working, just to keep them on your team,
Yeah.
right? Um,
100%.
so, and we knew this day would come when they everything would settle down and normalize, and there'd be actual competition again. Um, so, yeah, and to your point, a huge portion of the mortgage lenders did not renew their license for 2024. A
Yeah.
huge portion of them. Now I forget the stat, but big. One of my neighbors, this little personal reference. One of my neighbors is a rock star title gal. She is a rock star. She is brilliant. She'd be an asset to any title company. She got laid off from her title gig. She's having a hard time getting another one. And she is the cream of the crop.
Yeah.
So, this is part of these cycles. This always happens. You're up, you're down. And, these lenders and these agents who are buying Ferraris when they were in the huge refi boom, or, everybody was selling houses 10% over with cash. Um, yeah, they're hurting right now, right?
Yeah.
And those lenders and professionals who they took that boom money and they bought themselves a triplex, or they bought themselves an apartment building, or they bought themselves they did something besides buy a Ferrari, right?
Yeah.
They bought real assets that are going to grow in value, offer cash flow, offer, tax benefits. And you see this in all industries. You see this in oil and gas. I don't know about big pharma, but you
Yeah.
certainly see the boom and bust in oil and gas and
Hmm.
real estate, obviously. So this is part of the deal, right?
Yeah, just part of our cycle along with the numbers. And next at Dave's on MLS, right? So we've been flat year over year, right?
Hmm.
December 2022, 31 days on the market. December 23, 31 days on the market. December 2021, 6. like
Wild.
like and so it's one day for a lot of properties. It might be 2 weeks for other properties, and you end up with 6 days on the market back in 2021. Unbelievable. Month supply. All right. We went basically flat year over year. 2 months supply now, 2 months supply last year, December 2021, zero point 0.7. So that's 3 weeks essentially. So if no one new listed their house, everything would be sold out in 3 weeks. Right now we're at 2 months, which still, like, what's a balanced market? 4 to 6 is what they say, you
Okay.
know? So we still just have nothing that's hitting. We just don't have enough for the supply of what we know as a normalized kind of market. Showings per listing, which ties in with the interest rates, right? Here's another good one here. So showings per listings on the market December 2023 or 2022 was 4.2. So in a month, you had 4.2 showings on average on every listing on the MLS. December 2023, 4.5. So a tiny bit more, but essentially flat. December 2021 was 11.4. So more, almost 3 times as much showings per active listing on the market, which ties into the interest rates. And what I want to ask you, so we were at 6.3% in December 2022, 6.6% December 2023. Once again, we don't see the months where it went up to 8%, and then back down. December 2021 was 3.5%. So the amount of showings, right, is the amount of buyers in the market based on how much active inventory there is out there. How does the interest rate affect our buyer pool, right? From your opinion and what you see. I don't know how many buyers there are in the market, period. I don't know if anybody has that number. Um, but how do the interest rates affect how many people are in the market, period?
Well, the easy answer is the higher the rates, the less people in the market, right? Because the higher the rates, that's going to raise your debt to income ratio. And there are caps to these DTIs, these debt to income ratios, when you go get a Fannie or Freddie loan, right? Let's say it's 45 to 48 for conventional loans. It's 50 to maybe 55 for Govy loans like FHA, VA.
Mm-hmm.
And so once you go beyond those, you simply can't buy a house, right, with debt. So it's going to eliminate people. Now, if you swing that to the other side, when things were crazy low, you could look at that as if that was free money relative to inflation. So I'll give you an example. If you're borrowing money at 3.5%, and
Mm-hmm.
then the inflation rate pops up to 7% or 8% or 9%, now you're paying that mortgage with dollars that are less valuable, right? So these long-term debt instruments, right? A 30-year fixed is a wonderful hedge on inflation, a
Yeah.
wonderful hedge, right? So for me, I can't get enough of the cheap money that's fixed for 30 years, right? I mean, you can get 10 Fannie and Freddie, right? 30-year fixes. So that's one primary and 9 investment properties. Now, some lenders will
Mm-hmm.
cap it at 5, but I know in my portfolio you can get to 10, right?
Yep.
My portfolio of lenders, you can get to 10. And then after that, you're now in the banking world, or I should say the commercial world, where
Mm-hmm.
any investment deal you're doing past then is essentially a commercial loan, right? Um, so the interest rates, so that's where the numbers relative to inflation and how it caps people out, how interest rates affect us. Now, one more thing, and let's remove the numbers. There is the emotional side, right? These buyers say, oh, Joe Bob next door got a 3% interest rate. I couldn't dare stomach 6.5. I'll just wait till they come down to 3. Okay, you're going to be waiting potentially forever, right? of course, I don't predict interest rates. You know that.
Yep.
Everybody who's listening should know that. Um, but one thing I would bet is I'd bet three isn't coming back anytime soon. Dare I say, anytime in my lifetime.
Yeah.
So these people get emotional about how their neighbor got a really low interest rate. Well, times are different,
Yeah.
right? You got a super low interest rate 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Okay, the
Yep.
interest rate is what it is. You got to put it as relative to the deal. And what I encourage everybody to do is zoom out, right?
Yep.
Zoom out to a 10-year perspective, a 20-year, a 30-year, right? In the 80s, our parents were getting mortgages in the teens, and they're happy, right?
Yep.
So if you look at the graph of where interest rates are relative to where they've been in our lifetime, they're pretty darn good in the sixes.
Yeah.
Pretty darn good in the sixes.
Yeah. It just takes a little while to adjust, right?
Yeah.
Um, and that's kind of it. So, all right, on to the big ones of 2024 and beyond, right? Do you see us having any sort of 10 to 20% price correction in the coming years? Um, and what do you think 2024 is going to bring? And then the question I get all the time too is, how bad can it get, right? If our median price is in the mid 500s right now, like, can it get to the mid 800s, like Toronto, San Francisco? Like, are we on that trajectory in your opinion?
Well, Denver relative to San Francisco, no, because San Francisco has a wall in the form of the ocean that you simply can't build any
Yeah.
further west, right? In Denver, you can keep building east. And you could say, oh, the wall is the mountains. Well, plenty of people live in the mountains. They build in the mountains. So
Mm-hmm.
that's not a wall. It's just a little hill that
Yeah.
you got to climb to live, to build. And then obviously we can just keep heading east. So there's not a cold, hard stop like San Francisco has. I don't know anything about Toronto, but listen, Denver is a very desirable place to live. The Denver
Mm-hmm.
metro area, the weather's great, lots of outdoor activities. It's awesome. I don't blame people for moving here.
Yeah.
I wish the traffic was a little better, and I get a little grouchy when I'm trying to go skiing on a Saturday. But hey, this is a great place to live. People will continue to move here.
Yeah.
Fair enough, right? Well, they can continue to build east as they are. I remember when Parker was like a podunk town, right? I
Yeah.
remember when Elizabeth was a podunk town. Right now, you just drive to Parker, you drive through Elizabeth. It's just development, 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 and there's plenty of room to build east. Um, Maybe we run into some water issues, right?
Yep.
Maybe. Um, but that's the only thing that I could see kind of structurally, from in terms of the land use that could slow down is water. And I encourage you to have somebody, a water expert, onto your show.
I would love it.
But and in terms of a crash, I just simply don't see it. The inventory is the backstop. The inventory is the market prop, right? It's propping up the market. Um, I do believe living indoors will remain popular. Now, obviously, I'm biased, right? I invest in living indoors and eating food, right?
Mm-hmm.
Residential, multifamily real estate, and farmland. I invest in debt on those things. So just know that I am biased, but I simply don't see anything structural to cause a crash. And if there is a big crash, it's not going to come from structural things in the real estate market. I mean, maybe social stuff or election stuff that I don't that's beyond my purview, right?
Yeah, I'm 100% with you there. I think if it happens, and I think it could, I think we're balancing. We got an interesting balancing act going here, and if you tip the scales by some massive event, sure, I think something can happen. But I think that's for any time in any market,
Right.
anywhere. Take COVID, right? Everything crashed by 30% in the blink of an eye. Okay, and then
Yep.
it rebounded like crazy. So yeah, take it with a grain of salt. Make your decisions for you and your family and what's best for you. And I just thank you for coming on, sharing your experiences with us. I know it's a wealth of information. If people want to reach out to you, or if they want to come spend time with your cat, what's the best way to do that? I had to mention it at least once.
Well, the cat is needs some screen time. Cat needs some love. Here, this is Hops. Say hi to Mr. Alex Tops. This is Hops.
I love
Um,
it.
yeah, I'm on the Excel Financial Group's website. You can reach me at Chris at acresfirstlending.com. So CHRIS at acresfirstlending.com. Acres First is my private lending practice. Excel Financial is my Fannie and Freddie mortgage brokerage practice. And then you can find me on YouTube. I've got a little YouTube channel called Capital Stewardship, and I'm one of the beginning YouTubers out there trying to show some love, offer some value. And that's my story, Alex. Thank you for having me, man. I always appreciate your insights. I like this because you look at things a little different, right? You've come from the brokerage side, the flipper side. You're really good at remodeling properties, and it's good to hear that at least some of these contractors are enjoying the competition that's appropriate for capitalism, because they haven't had any competition. They've just been so full of
Yeah.
work the
Yeah.
last 5 years that even getting one of them to call you back was a challenge. So that's good intel. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Awesome. Yep. The market is doing what the market is meant to do.
That's
Right.
right.
And with that, thanks again, Chris. And I appreciate you sharing the insights.
Absolutely. See you, Alex.
See ya.